quote: "If you are not willing to learn, no one can help you. If you are determined to learn, no one can stop you." Today's articles: PLA pulls back from Galvan clash site. 1.4 lakh families reach Manrega's annual work limit. COVID-19 tests cross 1 crore ICMR. Coronavirus is airborne, 239 experts warn in letter to WHO. Gangster of Kanpur from editorial page. The first article: PLA pulls back from Galvan clash site. Disengagement begins after Dhoval Wang Yi phone call. Tense structures dismantled at points on LAC. 3 weeks after the worst military clashes in decades, India and China have begun the process of disengagement at contentious locations along the disputed line of actual control (LAC), a government source said on Monday. The disengagement process, a work in progress, commenced after Special Representatives Ajit Dhoval and Wang Yi tasked to hammer out a solution to the boundary dispute spoke over telephone on Sunday evening. The Hindu had reported on Sunday that the SRs would hold talks to resolve boundary tensions between the two countries. In the first signs of de-escalation, Chinese troops moved back some distance and dismantled tents at some locations along the LAC. In the Galvan Valley, Chinese troops have shifted 2 kilometers from the site of the June 15 violent clashes, while some tents have been removed by the PLA in the Finger 4 area of Pangong Tso, government officials said on Monday. The PLA was seen removing tents and structures at patrolling point 14. Some rearward movement of vehicles is seen at the general area of Galvan, Hot Springs and Gogra, the government source said. Without giving the specific distances moved, the source said the pullback at each location would be confirmed after verification. Separate statements from the Indian and Chinese governments after Mr. Dhoval and Mr. Wang's talks suggested that both were keen to put an end to the serious troop buildup along their contentious boundary. Both statements stressed the need for a complete disengagement along the LAC. At Pangong Tso, some tents has been removed from the Finger 4 area and the PLA has moved back some distance, said a second government source without elaborating, adding that details of the pullback had to be verified on the ground. Pangong Tso issue. Pangong Tso is one of the most contentious areas of the current standoffs, with the PLA moving about 8 km inside up to Figure 4. India's claim is still Figure 8 as per the alignment of the LAC. Chinese troops have shifted 2 km from the face-off site in Galvan. Temporary structures being removed by both sides, a senior government official told the Hindu, adding that a physical verification had also been conducted. The PLA had moved well within India's perception of the LAC in the Galvan Valley after the June 15 incident when 20 soldiers were killed. India had matched China's presence with bunkers and temporary structures, and the two armies were in eyeball-to-eyeball positions. Corps commander talks. As part of an understanding reached during the June 30 Corps commander level talks on Sunday, a survey was done to verify if China had acted on its assurances. A defense official said on the condition of anonymity that this was just the initial step in the phased disengagement process. It was during the de-escalation process on June 15 that the violent clash occurred in the Galvan Valley. The Chinese have given no figures on their dead and wounded. As reported, the military commanders indicated that at first the de-escalation would take place at all the friction points, Galvan, Pangong Tso, Hot Springs, and then depth areas such as Despang Plains in the north where China had amassed troops would be looked into. On June 19, China's foreign ministry said the Galvan Valley was located on the Chinese side of the LAC in the western section of the Sino-Indian border, suggesting it was making new claims in the area. Call between Dhoval Wang led to disengagement. NSC and the Chinese Foreign Ministry as special representatives on the boundary questions last met in December 2019. The disengagement between the India and China along the line of actual control announced on Monday came after a long and detailed conversation between National Security Advisor NSA Ajit Dhoval and Chinese State Councillor Wang Yi on Sunday evening. The high-level political intervention is significant because Mr. Dhoval and Mr. Wang are both special representatives on the boundary talks and had last met in December 2019. Mr. Wang is both Foreign Minister and State Councillor, a position which is roughly the equivalent of an NSA. For the past few weeks through the crisis, Mr. Dhoval had been monitoring the situation from home despite the fact that he had chosen to self-quarantine after 2 family members contracted the coronavirus. Sources said that Mr. Dhoval rejoined work at his office on Saturday, a day before the call with Mr. Wang. Statements on the call is issued by India's Ministry of External Affairs and China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs (MFA) both emphasized an agreement to push for an early disengagement, yet differences remain on some issues that point to uncertainties that may lie ahead. On the disengagement, the MEA said both agreed they should complete the ongoing disengagement process along the LAC expeditiously and ensure a phased and stepwise de-escalation in the India-China border areas. The statement said both should strictly respect and observe the LAC and should not take any unilateral action to alter the status quo and to work together to avoid any incident in the future that could disturb peace and tranquility in border areas. No mention of LAC. China's statement did not mention the LAC, let alone respecting it. The statement said both sides welcomed the progress achieved in the recent military and diplomatic meetings, agreed to stay in dialogue and consultation, and stressed the importance to promptly act on the consensus reached in the commander level talks between Chinese and Indian border troops and complete the disengagement of the frontline troops as soon as possible. The MEA statement did not mention the cause of the recent tensions, which India said on June 25 was because the conduct of Chinese forces this year has been in complete disregard of all mutually agreed norms. And they had also crossed the LAC and erected structure on India's side in the Galwan Valley. The statement did not mention the Galwan Valley either, but China did. The right and wrong of what recently happened at the Galwan Valley in the western sector of the China-India boundary is very clear, the Chinese statement said, adding that China will continue firmly safeguarding our territorial sovereignty as well as peace and tranquility in the border areas. Differing perspectives, both presented differing perspectives of the border strategic relationship. The MEA said that SRs agreed that both sides should take guidance from the consensus of the leaders that maintenance of peace and tranquility in the India-China border areas was essential for the further development of our bilateral relations and that two sides should not allow differences to become disputes. Therefore, they agreed that it was necessary to ensure at the earliest complete disengagement of the troops along the LAC and de-escalation from India-China border areas for full restoration of peace and tranquility, its statement said. The Chinese statement emphasized the difficulties in the relationship, calling upon both to adhere to the strategic assessment that instead of posing threats, the two countries provide each other with development opportunities and to pay great attention to the current complex situation facing China-India bilateral relations and work together to overcome and turn it around as soon as possible. We hope India can work with China to guide public opinion in the right direction, keep and advance bilateral exchanges and cooperation, and avoid amplifying the differences and complicating matters so as to jointly uphold the big picture of China-India relations. it said. Where both were in agreement was to keep the channels open at the highest levels. The MEA said the SRs agreed to continue their conversations to ensure full and enduring restoration of peace and tranquility in the India-China border areas in accordance with the bilateral agreements and protocols. The Chinese said both agreed to strengthen communication through the mechanism of the SRs meeting, hold meetings of the working mechanism for consultation and coordination on China-India border affairs without interruption, consistently improve and strengthen confidence-building measures and prevent more incidents that undermine peace and tranquility in the border areas. While the news of the move to disengage was positive, former Foreign Secretary Shyam Saran cautioned there was a need to wait and see how this translates on the ground. I see that in the Chinese statement there is a reaffirmation of its position on Galwan with a commitment to safeguard what China considered its territorial claim, he told the Hindu. While tensions may subside, but the relationship will never be the same again. Second article. 1.4 lakh families reach Maneraga's annual work limit. Double household quota, say activists. At least 1.4 lakh poor rural households have already completed their quota of 100 days of work under the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act (Manrega) in the first 3 months of the year and will not be eligible for further benefits under the scheme for the rest of the year. Another 7 lakh households have completed 80 days and are on the verge of running out of work as well, according to the scheme's database. With COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdown resulting in thousands of unemployed migrant workers returning to their villages and now dependent on Manrega wages, activities are urging the government to increase the limit to at least 200 days per household. This is an unprecedented situation where many are clearly desperate for work and dependent on Manrega wages. In many areas, monsoon is the hungry season. If you stop providing work at this time, it will be a huge crisis for these families, said Nikhil Dey, a Rajasthan-based activist with the Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangathan. The Manrega scheme contains a provision for districts affected by drought or other natural disasters to request an expansion of the scheme to allow for 150 days of work per household. Given that COVID-19 was declared a national disaster, activists have demanded that this provision be implemented immediately. Overall, 23 lakh households have already completed 60 days of work. Although these 1.4 lakh families may only be a fraction of the 4.6 crore households who have benefited from the scheme this year, it is the poorest families with no options other than Manrega who have already reached their 100-day limit and need an extension. These are the most vulnerable families. Remember that most states did not even provide Manrega work in April during the lockdown, said Mr. Dey. So these are families who have actually completed 100 days in just May and June. Those who are now at the 60-day or 80-day point will also complete 100 days in the next month and a half. It will peak very fast, warned Mr. Dey. Per adult individual. The Narega Sangharsh Morcha argues that the limit should be imposed per adult individual rather than per household and has demanded an increase to 200 days per individual at a daily wage rate of Rs 600. The current wage rate of Rs 200 per day does not even match up to minimum wage rates in most states. With almost 60,000 households which have completed 100 days of work, Chhattisgarh has the highest rate among states according to central scheme data, followed by Andhra Pradesh with almost 24,500 households in this category. However, the AP government maintains its own database showing that 84,000 households or 88.6% of all beneficiary households in the state have already completed 100 days of work. AP. has repeatedly complained that the state's Manrega ground reality is not accurately captured in real time in the central database. The demand for Manrega work almost doubled in June in AP as there is no other work available for many people. Construction sector, which usually observes a large number of workers, has also collapsed. We are seeing a flurry of new job cards being issued, says Chakradhar Buddha, an AP-based activist and researcher with LibTech India. The monsoon seems to be good so far, and for those who can get farm work, that may be an option for the next few months. The worst scenario may be in December when agriculture work is over and the Manrega work has also run out. What will people do then? He said, adding that for women, elderly and disabled or those in Adivasi areas who cannot get farm work, the situation is even more acute. This is a national issue. As a very bare minimum, the centre should expand the limit to 200 days per household this year, Mr. Buddha said. Third article, COVID-19 tests cross 1 crore ICMR. Those testing negative in rapid antigen tests should be spent for RT-PCR checks. COVID-19 tests in India crossed the 1 crore mark on Monday with 1,35,525 cumulative samples tested so far, the Indian Council of Medical Research said on Monday. In the past 24 hours, about 3,46,459 samples were tested. The Council has now recommended that all laboratories, ports, hospitals initiating testing through rapid antigen tests should ensure that symptomatic patients who have tested negative in rapid testing should be referred for real-time RT-PCR testing also. The Council has also written to all the states UTs directing all private labs undertaking TrueNat, CBNA NAT based testing for COVID-19 to apply for NABL accreditation to ensure quality testing. The Health Ministry added that it is now advocating widespread testing and has also informed the states that increased focus has to be on the test, trace, treat strategy. India has been able to cross the 1 crore test mark by the continuously expanding network of testing labs throughout the country. As on date, more than 1,105 labs across the country are offering COVID tests. There are 788 labs in the government sector and 317 private labs, noted a release issued by the ministry. The Health Ministry has also released guidelines to deal with mental health concerns during the pandemic. Mental health in the times of COVID-19 pandemic. The document tackles the unprecedented challenge to mental health care across all settings in India. The document has been put together by the Department of Psychiatry, National Institute of Mental Health and Neuroscience. Given the likely magnitude of the pandemic and the patchy availability of specialist mental health care across the country, it has become necessary for all non-psychiatric healthcare professionals who often form the front line of the healthcare response to provide whatever is possible, the guidelines said. The care of psychiatrically ill takes a backseat in pandemics. While this needs to be addressed, it is necessary that day-to-day psychiatric practice be recalibrated to ensure greater sensitivity regarding infection transmission, it added. Detailed guidelines. The document has two parts. The first is guidelines for non-psychiatric medical professionals to address mental health needs of the community and in COVID-19 treatment centers, while the second part provides recommendations for psychiatrists to ensure safety during their day-to-day practice amid the disease outbreak. Planning and policy making are critical to ensure program effectiveness. It is essential to ensure that mental health is integrated into the broad framework of COVID-19 healthcare response to ensure adequate and appropriate care to the many thousands who are psychologically disturbed following the pandemic, notes the document. Fourth article. Coronavirus is airborne. 239 experts warn in letter to WHO. The coronavirus is finding new victims worldwide, giving rise to clusters of infection that increasingly confirm what many scientists have been saying for months. The virus lingers in the air indoors, infecting those nearby. In an open letter to the World Health Organization (WHO), 239 scientists in 32 countries have outlined the evidence showing that smaller particles can infect people and are calling for the agency to revise its recommendations. The researchers plan to publish their letter in a scientific journal. If airborne transmission is a significant factor, especially in crowded spaces with poor ventilation, the consequences for containment will be significant. Masks may be needed indoors, even in socially distant settings. Healthcare workers may need N95 masks that filter out even the smallest respiratory droplets as they care for coronavirus patients. Filters may help. Ventilation systems in schools, nursing homes, residences, and businesses may need to minimize recirculating air and add powerful new filters. Ultraviolet lights may be needed to kill viral particles indoors. The WHO has long held that the coronavirus is spread primarily by large respiratory droplets that, once expelled by infected people in coughs and sneeze, fall quickly to the floor. Even in its latest update, released June 29, the WHO said airborne transmission of the virus is possible only after medical procedures that produce aerosols or droplets smaller than 5 microns. But interviews with nearly 20 scientists paint a picture of an organization that, despite good intention, is out of step with science. Whether carried aloft by large droplets that zoom through the air after a sneeze or by much smaller exhaled droplets that may glide the length of a room, these experts said the coronavirus is borne through air and can infect people when inhaled. In early April, a group of 36 experts on air quality and aerosols urged the WHO to consider the growing evidence on airborne transmission. The agency responded promptly, calling Lydia Moravska, the group's leader and a long-time WHO consultant, to arrange a meeting. But the discussion was dominated by a few experts who were staunch supporters of hand washing, and the committee's advice remained unchanged. Mr. Moravska and others pointed to several instances that indicate airborne transmission, particularly in poorly ventilated and crowded indoor spaces. They said the WHO was making an artificial distinction between teeny aerosols and larger droplets, even though infected people produce both. We have known since 1946 that coughing and talking generate aerosols, said Lindsay Marr, an expert in airborne transmission of viruses at Virginia Tech. The WHO also is relying on a dated definition of airborne transmission, Ms. Marr said. The agency believes an airborne pathogen like the measles virus has to be highly infectious and travel long distances. Experts all agree that the coronavirus does not have that way. Ms. Mary and others said the coronavirus seemed to be most infectious when people were in prolonged contact at close range, especially indoors, and even more so in superspreaders events, exactly what scientists would expect from aerosol transmission. Fifth article from the editorial page. Gangster of Kanpur. The killing of policemen by a gangster points to a collapse of the rule of law. The killing of 8 policemen by a criminal gang in Kanpur in Uttar Pradesh on Friday bears the violent signature of a dysfunctional society and an alarming evocation of governance in India's most populous state. A history sheeter who has at least 5 dozen cases of murder, extortion, kidnapping, and other violent crimes against him, waited in ambush at his own home for the arrival of the police party that was seeking to arrest him. One of the dead was in his early 20s and had just started his career, and the one was nearing retirement. These were needless and avoidable deaths. Reports suggest that the gangster had received information about the impending raid from his sources within the police. The administration responded to the tragic setback by bulldozing the gang leader's house and vehicles parked in the premises. Straddling the worlds of government, contracts, politics, and crime, the gangster Vikas Dubey is emblematic of the nexus between politics, crime, and policing in many parts of the country. The circumstances that went into the making of this incident and the response of the administration all point to the same morbid affliction that can be fatal to any democratic society, the collapse of the rule of law. Criminal gangs shielded by politics and police forces that bend to cast communal and political vested interests form a malevolent circuit that perpetuates itself and rewards its patrons. These individuals in uniform ended up paying with their lives for this. The police force is the coercive arm of the state, often in direct contact with ordinary citizens. The quality of policing, therefore, has an outsized impact on the overall quality of governance. Poor training and alienating and dehumanizing work environment, corruption, and a lack of resources add to the crisis in policing. Politicians in power often use the police the same way politicians out of power use gangsters. Not surprisingly, there are times when the police mirror in character the criminal gangs they chase down. UP is not unique, but these melodies reveal themselves on a petrifying scale in the state. Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath has declared tough on crime policy, but this has sometimes meant that the police resort to shortcuts that subvert the legal course. The state has had 5,179 encounters in which 103 suspects were killed and 17,745 surrendered in a little over the last 2 years. Questionable coercive measures such as collective punishment and criminalization of political protest and suppression of freedom of expression have also been mainstreamed as regular policing tools. This tragic loss of their own personnel in what should have been a routine law enforcement operation must fire up the UP police to uphold professionalism, cleanse its ranks of the corrupt and the inefficient, and liberate the state from the fear of gangsters. Thank you for watching everyone. Please like, share and subscribe my channel. Thank you.